Signs at Southland, Monday, June 6th, 2022. We are recording on a Monday for the third straight time. We wanted to take some time to let Georgia Tech baseball run its course. We'll get to that in a second. That'll probably take up most of our day. But first, around the rest of the diamond that is the NCAA baseball tournament, we had some really weird and wacky results, but none weirder than what happened in the Stillwater Regional this weekend. I guess is what is still in progress. Mr. Purdy, do you want to set the table?
All right, yeah. So Stillwater Regional had Oklahoma State hosting. We had Grand Canyon, Arkansas, and Missouri State there. And so what was it? The second elimination game was Oklahoma State, Missouri State. Oklahoma State lost their way to that game by losing 20-12, so already high scoring enough as it was. And then they proceeded to put up a 29 spot on Missouri State, who did manage to score 15, which would have won every other game except the game that Arkansas beat Oklahoma State in. That adds up to 44 combined runs, which, knowing this is a Big 12 school, made me wonder how many games did they outscore Oklahoma? Like, how many, if 44 runs, was that more points scored than any of Oklahoma State's football games? Do y'all want to do y'all have an over-under of what that number could be if you haven't looked?
I think I would set the over-under at 7 and then take the under.
Okay. Jake?
I'm going to say like 4.
4? Take the over-under, though.
I'm confident. I'm going to say 4 even.
4 on the dot?
All right, 4 even. Okay.
I just spent 3 days in a casino, so, just feeling the energy.
The really funny part about this is that Oklahoma State started the season against Missouri State and beat them 23-16. So you could have taken either score. Yeah, in football. So you could have taken either score for either sport here. But then, Akshay, you were correct. There were 5 more games that happened. So the end total was 6. At Boise State, they won 21-20, so only 41 points. Versus Baylor, it was 24-14, it's only 38 points. And then at West Virginia, they won 24-3, it's only 27 points. And then at Texas Tech, they won 23-0, so only 23 points. And then against Baylor again, they lost 21-16, so only 35 points in that game. 37.
Not to football post too much, because we all know that this isn't a football podcast, but Oklahoma State really cranked it up on defense this year compared to where their offense usually is. Their offense was definitely much more pedestrian. And I wish I had the advanced metrics in front of me to really sell that. But the most much more pedestrian.
The most points they allowed in a win was in the Fiesta Bowl when they allowed 35 to Notre Dame.
Good game.
That was a meltdown at the end of that game, too.
Yeah, that was.
I just want to touch on a couple of things that you didn't mention, Jack, about these. Oklahoma State in their winners bracket game versus Arkansas. I just want to pull up how this game ended and how Arkansas ended up having 20 runs.
I'm pulling up the play-by-play now so I can track this.
Yeah, let me pull this up. So Oklahoma State opens the top of the 8th up 10-8. Keep this in mind. The next couple of plays for Arkansas as they bat. Single, hit by pitch, strikeout, walk, hit by pitch, walk, homer. And that homer is a grand slam, I believe. I may have read that backwards, but in either case, Arkansas collected 8 runs on 2 hits. And if I remember correctly, I took this screenshot before the inning was over. They still only had one out.
3 hits. I'm looking at it.
3 hits. They got another homer after that, I think. They had 3 hits to get 10 runs or something stupid like that.
That's incredible.
And so they led 10 so Arkansas led like 18 to 10 after this half inning. Epic meltdown. the guy that came in, so they had two pitching changes. They put in McLean at pitcher right after the second hit by pitch. And then he gives up, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 runs and like 4 straight in like 4 straight walks was a hit by pitch. And then he doesn't come out of the game. He comes off the mound and then has to play third base.
Oh no.
Where he watches all of his walks score on a grand slam.
Oh god. That's some little
incredible
stuff right there.
Incredible content. And I also want to mention in the elimination game that followed yesterday morning between Oklahoma State and Missouri State, if you look at the box score for that one, Missouri State at one point in the third inning led 12-0
What?
Missouri
they came
State
back from 12 and put up
12-0 and Oklahoma State put up 4 touchdowns and extra point.
Jeez.
Not just an extra point. 4 touchdowns and a 2-point
conversion. I got a 2-pointer out of that. Yeah.
Just
that's incredible.
Quality content. And not only that, Arkansas should have won this elimination game yesterday, but crazy stuff continues to happen in Stillwater because Arkansas was unable to get out of, I think it was the 8th inning, because their left fielder fell down trying to get after a Oklahoma State fly ball to left field. He just slips on the grass. Ball goes to the fence. Oklahoma State scores 2, and then they leave in a pitcher too long and get homered on. And Oklahoma State ends up winning 40-10. That game right now, as we record, the game 7 of that regional is in the bottom of the 3rd inning. Ironically, it is completely scoreless.
It's incredible. I don't know how that's possible. Oklahoma State has 65 runs through 4 games so far.
I mean, they've all been very entertaining blood. I don't care how long the game is. At that point, action packed.
Yeah.
More blood for the blood god, as we like to say on this podcast. Mr. Grant, you were not watching a lot of baseball this weekend other than Georgia Tech, but you were in New Orleans celebrating a bachelor party. You mentioned to us before we started recording that New Orleans, surprisingly good college baseball town. LSU, but good college baseball town. What do you make of it?
Side note on that LSU thing. If you think it's crazy how much like Athens stuff they sell in Atlanta, New Orleans is a whole nother level because they have not just the like places you'd expect to see it, but like, you walk into the every pro shop, random sock store, everything has some sort of purple and gold LSU thing. So makes sense that they're very into, well, until 5 minutes ago, this college baseball postseason. Sorry, LSU. Yeah, that's we'll get to that. And well, I guess maybe we won't. I don't know. This is a podcast of tech sports, not LSU sports. But
no rights violations today, Mr. Grant.
In a weekend where the NBA and NHL were both deep in playoff contention. Softball's in Oklahoma City already. So a lot of good baseball out and about. Just in from catching games that happen to be on TV, sports bars, casino, restaurants, that whole nine.
I don't want to undersell.
It was on in a lot of places, so that was good.
I don't want to undersell the Women's College World Series either. There have been some really good, really tight games in OKC too. It's been nice, and they've gotten on ABC like this whole weekend. That was on ABC, so that was really cool to see too. Of course, in that Oklahoma's a death machine. They lost to UCLA by like 2 runs earlier today, and then came back and just absolutely murdered them, which was kind of fun in a very sickos way to see. Anything else about the general vibes of these tournaments before we move on to the Knoxville regional in specific? Silence means no. So we are going to move on to the Knoxville regional hosted by the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. As I said before last week, your competing teams, The Tennessee is the one national overall seed. Georgia Tech is the 2. Camels, the 3, and Alabama State Hornets, the 4. Game 1 was the noon kick in Knoxville on a Friday. That was a 15-8 Campbell win over Georgia Tech, sending Georgia Tech into the losers bracket. Campbell played some really solid all-around baseball. They had a really good pitcher on the mound, and they hit a lot of dingers. That'll hurt. That will definitely hurt you. So Tech heads to the losers bracket where they faced Alabama State. Easily dispatched Alabama State in game 3 of the regional. That is 13-4. Final score there. They move on to the second elimination game after Campbell loses a tight one to Tennessee in the winner's bracket in the 1-0 game. This is game 5. Tech, it dispatches Campbell 16-5. Campbell sort of just kind of runs out of arms. Their catcher can't stop anyone from Tech from stealing second. I think Colin Hall even stole second, and we'll get to Colin in a bit. But at that point, your situation behind the plate is getting a little dire. Marquise Grissom had a really rough go in the first couple innings here, but Josiah Siegel putting in some yeoman's work for the rest of the game, covering 6 2/3 with 98 pitches. The only other pitcher out of Tech's bullpen in that game completely saved the bullpen for game 6 of the first game of the regional final. This was unfortunately a Tennessee win, 9-6. Lots of defensive miscues in this one. Dawson Brown was left in a little too long. Colin Hall misses a knuckleball that headed into center field in the top of the 9th, and it just sort of all cascaded down from there. Fellas, I want to talk about this regional sort of step by step. So let's jump back to game 1. Jake, I think you got a chance to watch this one. What were your takeaways from this opening game as we move through the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not the way we had wanted to start, but I don't think any of us saw it as something that would be out of the ordinary, out of predictable. Tech was not I wouldn't call it overmatched, but it definitely wasn't a what the heck did they do to ramblinwreck.com? What?
Yeah, it's brand new. Refreshed as of this weekend.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say, I was literally just on this on Friday. Like I was.
Yeah, they changed it. They changed it Saturday.
This is how you know that we are prepared for this podcast. Anyway, I have thoughts on their web design, which I will share probably at the end of this episode, but please, baseball.
I bet they took out. So there's a lot of like unlinked stuff in the back ends that I've just picked up over the years. There's no way that all survived unless it's literally just an overlay on all the existing stuff. Anyways,
it
baseball.
Looks like it is.
Baseball, love baseball. We all are big baseball.
Love
boys.
the Yakets, baby.
No, so just in terms like it wasn't I mean, 7 runs looks like a lopsided score, but I wouldn't say it was dominating. It was just Campbell got, on the board with 5, and then they got another 5. And when you're giving up multiple like big crooked innings in a game, you're not going to win that. And quite frankly, I don't think anyone, at least that I was with, was all that surprised based on the pitching we've had throughout the year. And, you can't be a team that even expects to win a couple games in a regional if you're pitching, if you're scoring 8 runs and you're not even in the game or close to it, like that's, Campbell was going out there and they were going to play their brand of baseball, and it matches up very well for them against our pitching. And I think they showed that in the first game, but again, we can get into the second Campbell matchup, and I think that'll flip the table back towards some of the Tech strengths and make that a little bit more of a positive connotation.
Right. A couple things I took away from this. Number one, I guess this was technically in the second game, but Campbell keeps a pack of cigarettes in their dugout, which I found fascinating. fascinating on a bunch of different levels. I think you hit on something that I think has happened to Tech in a bunch of these regionals recently, right? They get overmatched in this first game, and they really struggle with the concept of this team from maybe a lower major is throwing their best guy, and you have to be able to deal with that even if you're your high major team. And they just were not able to deal with this properly. They let up bushels of runs, and when they were in defensively, and it inevitably cost them, right? And I think Tech has had plenty of this kind of game this season, where the runs come in droves, and it's basically unstoppable for a variety of factors, and some are just not even related to pitching miscues, right? And also, the last thing I want to say on this is Jack had this one last week when we were talking about this. He was like, they're going to lose that first game to Campbell. They're going to come out of the winner's bracket or the loser's bracket, and then probably get to the regional final. He picked this basically straight up. But
how dare you steal my next point, Akshay?
Well, I'm giving you a nice segue into we don't really have to talk about the Tech Alabama State game. That one's kind of a whatever. You lose that one, we have plenty of other discourse to talk about. But let me tee you up for game 5. Again, that is a Tech win, 16-5. You were able to catch a lot of this one. You had some really good notes from this. What did you see in this one as we continue to piece together the narrative this weekend?
Well, also, yeah, to reiterate, I went back to find the document where I wrote down my prediction, and I was spot on. Lose, win, win, lose. But anyways, if the beginning felt really similar to the beginning of Alabama State, because we were down against Alabama for that in those first couple innings, and Huff was still trying to find the zone, and Grissom had the same problem. Like he was not finding the zone early. He had 34 pitches in the first inning. Yeah, if Borden hadn't hit his home run in the second inning to lead off, it would have been a very different. Just the vibe just would have felt really different, because we were able to immediately get out of that schneid. And then what happened? Reed walked after that, and then Compton got hit by a pitch. He got hit a bunch that day too. Like that man's got to have a bruise on his rib cage by the end of the weekend. We also got we had a double. Jackson hit a double play, which wasn't great. Also, Campbell just was defensively just not in it, despite the fact that they couldn't stop us from stealing. They also just had multiple miscues defensively that just kind of helped give us those bleed runs that just kind of did us in early enough. So I do want to jump in on the base stealing. By the way, I had a count at one point of like 7 or 8 independent steals of second base. Yeah, I counted Simpson's, and I think he was at 3 or 4 by the end of the game. More than 4. Simpson alone had 3 or 4, I think. Yeah, it was stupid. Like that, I don't know if it was the pop time for the catcher or if it was the defensive positioning, but something was awry. And some of the guys that were stealing second, and I mentioned Colin Hall earlier, like they're fast. Like this whole lineup is fast, but it's fast. They're not guaranteed steals like Chandler Simpson is, right? Yeah, but like even Compton was stealing second, which is like that's our big old third baseman getting base steals too. So there's something definitely wrong there, but I'll let you finish on the game recap here. The second inning took 56 minutes. Yeah, it was 6-3 by the end of that. Which was done by a Jackson very good diving stop. Grissom was at 58 pitches by the end of 2 innings. So it just was a slog of a game. Just like I don't even want to count how many at-bats it was. It was just a bunch. Grissom only got to 74 pitches by the end of it, which was, I believe, Zach Maxwell's most, like that was the same number that when the broadcasters were like, oh, Maxwell's now thrown more than he's thrown in however many months. And then Siegel came in. Siegel had initially started warming up in the second inning of the Alabama State game when Huff wasn't finding the zone. And then he came up to warm up in the first inning of this game. But then once he came in, that was about it, because Borden's homer was his 20th of the season. And then, Borden got hit 3 times. That was about it. Tech scored in every inning until the 7th. in which that was it wasn't a 1-2-3 inning, but we were at 14-4 by that point. So the consistent barrage was good because I think it just made the last couple innings just like, okay, they can relax, even though the top of the eighth we still got some action. But yeah, in the end, it was the kind of game that you needed to have. Like, it needed to be a complete step down, or not step down. Like, it just needed to be a pounding to instill the confidence for Tennessee. I wish the game was only like 8-4 so that we got out of it sooner.
Yeah, I mean, a 1 hour second inning is not helping anybody.
No, it didn't help at all. We only had 90 minutes in between games, and we threw out this exact same lineup again. So, and Parada had ice in his ankle during the Alabama State game. So
yeah, that's something that I do want to. That's a good shout. He was icing his ankle at the end of the Alabama State game, and his defensive replacement. I mean, when you're talking about a top 5 draft pick, your defensive replacement is not going to be at the same level.
Yeah.
And not having Parada healthy, I think, hurts Tech. And it didn't come back to bite Tech in the Campbell game. But I think
not in that game. I did make a note that he was whiffing pretty early in the Alabama State game. So I wonder if his foot was just messing up his timing just a little bit, because he was missing those fastballs on the inner half of the plate that he's usually just killing 400 feet.
Yeah.
By the Tennessee game, he was fine in the zone again. But yeah, it still was a tad worrying in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And it takes, I mean, it's obviously going to take a while to make those adjustments. And it was a consistent sort of thing, right? I mean, he was able to play for those last 2 games. I think he came out, like I said, he came out a little early in the Alabama State one, but it's something to keep an eye on if you're a draft Nick, right? Like, how is that going to affect his development? Is this just like a really bad bruise? We don't really know what happened. I mean, it was right where it can't have been an offensive or it can't have been a defensive injury, because he was like, it was where he was wearing the ice is right where he has pads on his ankles.
Yeah, so I didn't notice like a time where like a ball hit him hard or something, even if it was when he was catching. So, and he didn't get hit, I don't think, down there. So,
yeah. Well,
I'm gonna butt back in because I've been biding my time here for a second. Not that I say it's good that this happened, but the wear and tear and grind of being a major league catcher, 162, all that good stuff, like, he's going to have to get used to it at some point. I hope it doesn't. I mean, it's obviously not going to affect draft prospects probably in the slightest. If it does, people are crazy, but it's a good example of, overcoming and having to do that. So I don't think it's necessarily, I mean, it's obviously not a career killer or anything, but it takes a lot to be a catcher. Same thing you see with, Joe Mauer having go down to first base. When he got old, like that's just, it's low key one of the most taxing positions in all of sports, and I don't think that gets talked about quite as much as it deserves to be. But
hey, you're telling me that sitting at a squat for upwards of 3 hours is difficult? Come on, you don't do that in your sleep?
And especially when you get to the pros, calling the game there too.
Mm-hmm. I will note, I don't think we would have even brought this up if this was a regular season game, just because the amounts at which we needed Kevin in those moments, it's just like, okay, every little, the senses are very heightened in this situation. So, I mean, if this was whatever random game against, I forgot who we played in the regular season. If it was the Virginia Tech series, it was like, okay, whatever, there's more games later. If he needs to sit, let him sit. Mm-hmm. But when it's like, well, the season could end tomorrow or right now. So,
the season could end in 4 outs, so maybe he needs to figure out if he's healthy. Yeah. So let's get into this game 6. Like I said, this is a Tennessee win, 9-6. The read that I had on this one initially is that Tech led this one 4-0 until about the 7th, and then they started leaking a couple runs here and there. Defensive mistakes. I think there was a booted ball away from a double play by Andrew Jenkins in that 7th inning that cost Dawson Brown a clean inning. To me, it felt not so much like on paper, it looks like a blown 4-0 lead. And especially blown once you get to the 9th inning, but it didn't feel so much as a blown lead as it was staving off the inevitable, right? Like, we sort of knew coming into this game how good Tennessee's bullpen was. We knew how good Tennessee's lineup was, and we were just getting really lucky that Tennessee was striking out a lot in this game. Zach Maxwell, I don't want this to get lost. Zach Maxwell had a really, really good outing.
Yeah.
He let in a couple walks at the very end, but he had a really, really good outing against a really, really good lineup, and is definitely an outing that Tech really needed at a moment it really needed it at. But in essence, in general, we knew how good this lineup was for Tennessee, and Tech was just getting lucky, right? They were getting really lucky with how things were falling, how balls were bouncing, and so 4-0 was never going to win this game. It just felt like Tech was staving off an inevitable outcome of Tennessee finally coming alive. Jake, I see you motioning like you have something to say, so you go for it first.
I think the most commendable or just worth shouting out aspect of the whole Zach Maxwell experience was that they were striking out, right? They weren't even putting balls in play. You can't advance the runners on a ground out if you're not grounding out. You can't hit a sacrifice fly if you're not putting the ball into the outfield.
11 strikeouts.
Yeah, 11 strikeouts, double-digit strikeouts in 6 innings pitched. The man gave the best performance of his college career at exactly the right and commendable time, and kind of did what I think we kind of all hoped we'd see out of him. Maybe when we heard about him trying to be a starter this year. Sorry, yeah. I'm not trying to be like, oh, and then he didn't start, but like, man, like that was the Zach Maxwell that I think he's been able to be all along. It's just this is when he put it all together when he needed it the most.
Yeah, to your point, I did a quick count. 9 of the 11 strikeouts came with men on.
Right, and Tennessee, I was going to play off that too. Tennessee, I think before that 9th inning, where things sort of melted down, they were something ridiculous, like 0-13 with runners in scoring position.
Yeah. It was
so it was when it was bad for Tennessee, it was bad. But Jake, I know when we were preparing this shot sheet, you had some stuff to say about my concept that this was sort of staving off the inevitable. So I want to let you run for a little bit.
I mean, it wasn't inevitable. It never is. Like that's the thing about baseball. It's why you play the games. And I don't think you can say it was like luck or, it was bound to happen as much. And as much as I want to believe that as a Tech fan who has seen this song and dance with this team enough times to know that, oh gosh, when's the other shoe going to drop? But like, hey, a 4-0 lead in baseball is still a 4-0 lead. And it doesn't matter if you're getting lucky. There are times when we had runners on and couldn't do anything, or sent a man straight into an out at the plate or whatever, and you look back and say you wish you had that back. But I don't think you can say any of it's inevitable, because that's it's not a 16-0 Pats world annihilation team, and even that team lost in the Super Bowl, right? So like,
what a knife twist. That team specifically.
I appreciate that, Jake. That was great. That was great to hear. I love that.
You're welcome. I don't know. It's just like, that's the thing that drives me bananas about sports talk sometimes. Like you're sent to Knoxville. It's not that the script has already been written. That's why sports, at least in my opinion, have so much interest, is you never know what you're going to see. And to that point, I believe the last time I checked the Maryland score, UConn was winning 7-1. Again, that's why you play the games, right? So
you didn't actually say how Maryland was doing currently. I think that would have been a better fit for your narrative.
I mean, Maryland is a national seed, and they're losing by a lot in their home ballpark.
Oh, I thought you meant that they were up now. Never mind.
No.
Joke landed very flat. We're going to move on from that immediately. But I also had another joke in the back of the tank for games, or the games are played on a spreadsheet. What did you expect? But I don't know. I think there's certain narratives that come into this game, right, that you sort of define and you preview and you define these games by. I think that was one of them, in that Tennessee has this formidable lineup. They've won 53 some odd games, right? So they've won 53 some odd games. They're the number one national seed. And so baseball is a game of randomness inherently, and it depends on where the ball lands and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I don't think you can blame people, and that maybe this is a bit in self-defense, but I don't think you can blame people as saying 4 runs is not going to win this game. Tennessee is inevitably going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, the inevitability was never exactly like nothing was inevitable, but statistically, knowing what pitching we had left after Maxwell threw 113 pitches, the feeling of it, I think, is still worth noting.
It's the classic Atlanta sports collapse, which I guess I can't technically make as a joke anymore after 2021.
No, we've got an MLS Cup and a World Series, sir.
Well, and 2021 is the nearest one.
Yeah. Yay.
But
soccer history. Go Jake.
Someone's finished his copy of Loserville.
No, I have 70 pages left. Don't spoil it.
I'm getting it from you after you're done. Damn. Anyway, but I don't know. It just had this aura of one of those late stage 2020 NLCS games where you're like, okay, Atlanta needs to score here and score in bushels, or the Dodgers are going to run away with this because they don't have the depth on the mound, which I guess was a different story in 2020 and 21 for the Braves compared to Tech. But
you're talking about the 18th NLDS basically right here. Yeah. Where that was whichever one where Juan Uribe hit like a bunch of homers against us. That series was kind of like that, where we knew we had the front end power, but as soon as it got past the 5th inning and we had to start relying on relievers that weren't as great, and our bench was just not the same as the Dodgers' payroll, it was about it.
The metaphor is bad. The metaphor is bad, but you can see where I'm going with this. Yeah. It was more so like we've all felt this feeling of imminent dread when it comes to Georgia Tech baseball and baseball specifically, or baseball in general, when it comes to bullpen play. And I think this came twice, right? You saw Zach Maxwell left in a little bit too long, some might say, to get to 113. He got out of a jam to get to, I think it was to get to the 7th.
Yeah, it was Dawson. We had bases loaded and he struck out Stevenson looking with the 4-2 lead. So anything probably would have resulted in a tie game.
Right. So he gets out of that jam and then gets pulled a little bit later for Brown. Brown gets really lucky, which this is where some of the luck comes into play, because he gets really lucky with the bounces, gets a couple double plays, is able to escape a Houdini-esque escape a couple innings. And then that top of the 9th hits, and it just is kind of he walks a couple guys to open the inning, and it just kind of melts down from there. And you kind of look at your bullpen and say, hey, I know you don't have a lot of guys, but Logan McGuire hasn't pitched this weekend, or he hasn't pitched much this weekend. We maybe give him a look. You got to win tonight to go play to win tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's a similar story that we've seen from Tech, where they don't have the pitching depth to get out of this game or get out of the regional final in general.
Yeah, it was a prayer definitely by the end of that. I actually even made a note about that, like how the ball was bouncing. This was the second batter when Beck came up. It was one of those, it was a high chopper, and it was one of those that you only get on a turf field, like that just goes the extra 5-6 feet. That if it's on dirt, that just the softness of the dirt and just how, well, I guess the fact that it's, with the difference between turf and dirt, that made all the difference. And Beck was safe on that. And then that got us, what did that do? That got it to first and second. Because the guy at second didn't move. Their lips just didn't move because it was just a ground ball. But that maybe would have saved a run at the end of that.
There was also, I think in that inning, in that sequence, there was a review at second base that was, maybe I'm thinking of another game. There was a
review. Yeah, there was a review. It was the one, it was, what was it?
It was called out on the field, but Tennessee was clearly, I think that's the first runner of that inning. It was called out on the field, but clearly safe when it was on replay.
That was the one they upheld as like basically they said call stands on that one, and then it was the one in the
Okay, then I'm
ninth
mixing something
that they
else.
the one in the ninth was the one that they got overturned, which brought it from 1 out to no outs with two
Yep.
on, and then and then the next at bat was the ball over Hall's head.
Yeah. And so just to color that a little bit more, Colin Hall's in center field. I think it was Jordan Beck at the plate. He hits a knuckler right into center field. Hall is a little too shallow, about 5, maybe 10 feet too shallow. Ball goes over his head. Ball hits the wall. I think one runner scores, and then it's runners at second and third.
Yep.
And then the hit parade starts for Tennessee. They get to 4-3. They tie it up on the next at bat, and then they eventually I think they end the inning with, well, of course they end the inning with 9. So 7 runs allowed, and Dawson Brown is left in even after a couple of these bad at bats, and it just sort of keeps escalating from there, much like we saw in Stillwater with their pitching situation. So
yeah.
Very difficult to see that ritual sacrifice is a bad phrasing for this, but it had to be someone to get the unlucky bounces, and it just ended up being Dawson Brown.
I will note, I feel like we were lucky to even be in this game in the first place. We only got our first 2 runs because of an E6 that when what was it? There was 2 outs in the third and guys on was it second and third? We had 2 guys, or what we had. Hall was on third at the time, and Parada, his ground ball. I just don't know how I knew this in the moment, but it felt a hair too slow, and the guy at short, there was it Stevenson at short. Where was that short? No, who was that short? Lawson was at short, and he just didn't charge it just barely enough. And whenever I play MLB The Show, if the camera pans weird if you know an error is coming or when an error is thrown, and if for whatever reason that little feeling stuck in my head, I'm like, something's not right about this at all. Throws in the dirt, the inning stays alive, and we squeeze out 2 runs there. I don't know how I kind of felt something was off there at all, but I mean, that's how we got our runs, and it was a gift. So the fact we even had a 2-0 lead in that early, it feels like we got something we didn't deserve out of that. So
yeah, and I think Stephen Reed adds 2 more runs later on, a couple innings later. So on a 2-run homer. So Tech was not its usual self at the plate, which doesn't help. I will say that they added 2 more during the bottom of the ninth. Tech was the home team in this one. Tech adds 2 more in the bottom of the ninth. They have 2 more guys on, and Colin Hall is the winning run, steps up to the plate, and he strikes out on 10 pitches. I think it was 10 pitches.
Looking too. He
looking on 10 pitches. And that's the season. Well, for Colin specifically, that's his career at Tech. Not to be ominous, but that's literally his last at bat in a Tech uniform, and that's also the end of the 2022 season for Georgia Tech. So not the best way to go in terms of a final 9th inning for Colin Hall, and just a really rough end to the game and a really rough end of the season in general for Georgia Tech. I did want to touch on a couple of big picture thoughts as we move forward into the off season. I think there's been a lot of consternation in our writers' room and I think among the Georgia Tech baseball fandom about Danny Hall's continued employment, especially that extension that he received a couple months ago. I will say he's now the winningest coach in active coach in NCAA history. So that's 1 point, I guess, in favor. And then number 2, he is very lucky that one of his revenue sports coach compatriots at his current employer is also undergoing a historic transformation or historic transition, if you will. So that's all I'll say on that piece. I think we've talked a couple of times now about Tech's pitching situation, right? They've really struggled to develop pitchers this year, guys that we found out to be reliable last year, like Luke Bartnicki, just kind of lost their way this year. and didn't really get a lot of time or just couldn't put it together on the mound. And so there's some questions that Tech needs to answer in terms of their pitching leadership, and how that's going. And the last thought, and I kind of want to open this up to y'all, the ACC, for all we talked it up the last couple of weeks heading into the tournament and during the ACC tournament, was kind of exposed in this tournament, right? The ACC got 8-9 teams into the field, and then only Louisville won on a completely absolute jobbing of Michigan earlier today on a really bad replay review. Notre Dame advanced out of Statesboro, and then VT was kind of one of the only teams that had a very comfortable regional weekend. Jack, I'll throw it to you first. What did you think of the ACC's performance in this year's tournament?
I mean, obviously would have liked a little bit more. I mean, we're getting a pretty good sampling of all the conferences though so far. We got we got 3 SEC teams in right now: Auburn, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. 2 ACCs between Notre Dame and VTech. 3 and Louisville. So of what's available, we're doing pretty well. There is still a possibility for 2 more SEC teams to go through. So we could be anywhere from tied for the best or a distant second, considering 3 out of the 16 available spots. So, I mean, yeah, could have been better. A Wake, how many were even ranked at this point though? Because like North Carolina was ranked, and then Miami was.
Miami's the big one, I think.
Yeah, Miami. I mean, obviously the weather situation was just crazy, and so that makes this thing even more of a coin flip than it already was, just in the playoff setting. And then Louisville got through theirs. I mean, obviously they had that craziness, but they still got through. Virginia didn't necessarily had an easy one to get through between Coastal Carolina and East Carolina. And then beyond that, Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's is kind of an upset out of all this though. Like Georgia Southern they were good and they were hyped because this is the first time they got to host one of these. Like if there was anyone up in like, yeah, I want to go to that spot of the ones I could have gotten to the cars right away, I would have gone to Statesboro.
Oh, and it was an immensely diverse group of schools that went out there too. Like it's Notre Dame, it's Texas Tech, it's what was the
UNC Greensboro.
UNC Greensboro. So just a wild mix of teams. Jake, over to you because you're the resident half Louisville fan and you don't believe in replay review apparently. How did you feel about the ACC in this first regional weekend?
I mean, I think it could theoretically have shaken out a little bit better. The only team that I think is like, whoa, is probably Miami. Miami had some interesting considerations with all the weather they've had and all that, but they were a great team this year. And I don't know. It's just a little bit odd to see them down and out so early in the weekend, but I mean,
odd but funny for what it's worth.
That's the rub. I don't cry for them because it's DU. But in terms of just what the ACC has done, I think we all kind of knew that certain things were going to shake out certain ways. Like at the end of the day, as much as I wanted Tech to win, that's kind of what we all expected, right? That's not something you can be too upset about. UVA, maybe, it's surprising not to see them in the regional final. But again, they were a team that was top 10 some of the year and a team that looked terrible for some of the year. So that's just why they play the games. I know that I have been dying on that hill as a cliche this weekend, but with Louisville through, I'm going to check. I don't know what the UNC score is / wound up being. I don't think that one's over yet.
That game is not over yet. That's 7-3 North Carolina in the 8th.
Yeah. So, I mean, 5 through to the 16, like that's if UNC.
I forgot that UNC was going to hold on here, but
that's a third of the, that's a third of the super regionals. Like, I don't know. You gotta.
That's good. That's dominance. Like there's a lot. That's a third of, and that's more than your share should be at if you're just considering Power 5. And there's a damn good group of 5 and other schools in this tournament too. So,
I think I think Jake touched on this too. It's like the public reaction or like the public narrative here is that the ACC, well, I haven't seen this. I guess I'm putting this together, is that the ACC underperformed because Miami melts down and bows out of this tournament. Florida State, who we thought was supposed to be really good in tournament settings, bows out of this tournament early. UNC has to go through the losers bracket. Wake Forest, who we've talked up a couple of times, is sort of melted down and out of this tournament. Notre Dame was fine. Notre Dame had a pretty easy weekend, all considered, if you compare it to other teams. But Tech had to go through the losers bracket. I'm just trying to hit Louisville. We already talked about, sort of just one on a prayer. Virginia Tech had a comfortable weekend. So it just comes down sort of to the level of comfort for some of these teams in advancing or making the regional final, and not a lot of comfort, right? I mean, out of those teams, the only two that sort of did as expected, and Notre Dame, I think you could even argue over performed, like you were saying, Jack. It's only Notre Dame and VT for the most part. I mean, UNC might advance and we might write that off eventually, but they had a tough road to get back to that regional final and potentially back into the super regional.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, like, what they had a home run robbery in that second elimination game. So like they really pulled, they were down to their last string, quite literally in some senses there. So that ain't easy for sure. And they match up with Stillwater. So if they could still host this thing. Like if Arkansas pulls it out, which they are currently winning, they get to stay home. Like that's not nothing as well. So I mean, not the longest ride for Arkansas to get there, but regardless, I mean, you take what you can. You take the ones you can get at home, and obviously Notre Dame's going to have to go to Tennessee, but UNC could host. Louisville will not be hosting. Virginia Tech will be hosting, so we'll get at least 2 ACC venues out of this for supers, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Just to go over some of the other hosts, I think all the hosting slots but two have been decided. That's Tennessee. That's a Knoxville Super Regional, a Greenville Super Regional, that's East Carolina, a College Station Super Regional, Blacksburg Super Regional, Corvallis Super Regional, Southern Miss is in Hattiesburg Super Regional. We still have to decide Chapel Hill or Stillwater, and then we still have to decide Stanford or College Park. Stanford doesn't have first pitch until 10:30 tonight. So
yeah, it's a late one.
Yeah,
Pac-12 kickoffs, gotta love them. This tournament, I mean, in general, just to sort of wrap up the tournament itself, the tournament has been fun. I mean, squeeze play has been hashtag not an ad, squeeze play has been a really fun watch, side by side with a live game. And other than the fact that a bunch of these games have been super tape delayed by ESPN on their various streaming platforms because they can't get their crap together across all of them, I've had a good time this weekend watching a bunch of baseball.
I gotta say, ESPN with the squeeze play and the 7 innings live that they've been doing the last couple of years, I think that's really helped certain people who maybe don't watch the game during the regular season get into it, always see the exciting stuff. Helped me stay on it when I only have one screen, honestly. And I don't know, whatever they can do to keep stuff like that going. I know they did 7 innings live, I think this weekend too, for the Women's College World Series, even though it was just the one broadcast. I'm pretty sure I saw it up on the stream, or maybe that was last week during Super Regional.
I think that was a couple. Yeah, I think that was earlier.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? Like that's it. It's maybe not something that people need during March Madness, even though I know some people who really like that format. But in terms of baseball, softball, I think it's especially
and football. Level, I would advertise it for football too.
But it's facet of the game that's growing, right? Or people don't like log in and go like, oh yes, I know Kentucky basketball is good or Alabama football is good.
Right.
A lot of people may know Vandy, and then it's kind of like, I don't know what's good and what's not. Just show me what's interesting, and I think it's been an underrated asset, I think.
Jack, any last thoughts on the NCAA baseball tournament before we move on?
For one of the first ones that I ever fully dived into this level, I had a lot of fun with it. And I think this usually always landed in the middle of like peak summer swim season for me growing up, and so just my attention was elsewhere. But being able to kind of see the vibe of this tournament and how it unfolds, and just be able to follow the storylines for once, like it's really fun. So I think for those that in the future can find a way to have time, just so you got a random, if this weekend's for whatever reason not big for you or your team's in it, I mean, yeah, to dive in a little bit. And now, as we mentioned, like we have the viewing options to make it far more enjoyable and to keep you on track. It's just so you don't have to follow like 80 Twitter accounts as well, because there's a lot of teams here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you don't really get the size of the scope until play starts on Friday and Saturday, and you have you have 16 games or 17 games going on at the same time.
Yeah,
and it's wild. I will say, like I was mentioning before, this needs to come to football during the fall weekends, because man, would it be so fun to have a red zone equivalent for college football. Goal line. I know
impromptu question: who would you have host that? Because it's got to be someone good. You can't skip on the host with that. If you had a Power 5 red zone kind of channel, who's hosting that?
I would say Anish Shroff. Anish Shroff has done like a really good job with like across some of the lower tier sports and some of the basketball. He has good energy, good vibes, and he's got a PLL lead analyst position now with that coverage. Nice. So I think he'd be a good pick there. None of the people that do Sports Center, though. None of them.
No, I wouldn't want them. No.
I could watch Scott Van Pelt sell like daytime television.
Yeah, okay, but I don't count Sports Center with SVP is not real Sports Center.
That is,
you have to give me that.
That is the SVP show for all intents and purposes.
The SVP show is just like a late time talk show or late night talk show, but with sports instead of celebrity drama.
I could get behind Hannah Storm doing it, actually.
Okay.
I think that wouldn't be awful.
I think she does hockey.
She does Sports Center still, right?
Yeah, she still does Sports Center. I think she also does hockey on the side now that the rights are back.
Yeah.
With ESPN. I may be mixing up a couple different anchors, though. I will say that Chris Budden has done a really good job manning the desk for both 7 innings and for squeeze play. I've really enjoyed her coverage, and I think the analysts that they've brought on have been really good. And you get a lot of live reactions from both of those shows, right? Yeah. Like these guys have, these groups have the TVs, the quad box, the oct box, or what have you, in the studio in front of them or on the desk screens, and they're all live reacting to stuff around the rest of the country. And with a 3-person booth, it's very interesting to see, okay, one person is watching a game in Statesboro, maybe the other person is paying attention to a game in Knoxville. And so they're reacting to different things at different times. And it's a very, it's sort of like watching a game in an IRC chat or like or on Twitter, everyone is, but live.
Yeah, that's why Red Zone became so good, was because Scott Hansen, it felt like Scott Hansen was in the room with you, and he had the remote for you. Like it
yeah, he was like, hey,
felt like you were just,
It's like, hey, I got a notification on my phone that this game is interesting, except it's a buzzer in his ear. We're going there. And I think that sort of initiative has to be something that, this is a soapbox moment, but that sort of initiative, that sort of content is something that these leagues need to prioritize. As I mean, like we did, millennials having short attention spans, yada, yada, yada. But I think we're starting to get to the point where some of these sports, we realize that like baseball, it takes a lot of time. There are interesting parts of each of these games. Let's showcase those. Let's showcase the fun that happens in these sports as it happens and as things develop.
It takes a lot of time, and you have to see the interesting stuff to know what the interesting stuff is, or to be like, oh, that was cool, I want to see more of that. If you're just sitting there going Zach Maxwell, great performance last night. There were times when Tennessee had runners on, whatever. But like, if you're just watching hey, here was 6 shutout innings, like for the team that's supposed to be the best, maybe you go, okay, this isn't for me. But
I'll let you finish.
If you have, squeeze play. Oh, now we're going over there for a couple pitches. Oh, back to Knoxville. Again, the one thing there is you can't feel the rhythm of the game. Maybe you miss some of the nuance, but I don't, not that I don't
It's a
care
really
about
palatable way to view it. Go ahead, Akshay.
and there's going to be 32 games on at a given time. You need to get around the country in order to see all that stuff that's going on.
Yeah, and I'll say that this is something that the Premier League does really poorly when they have simultaneous kickoffs. Right, we had Premier League final or decision day a couple weeks ago. The goal zone coverage, if I remember correctly, was focused on Manchester City's game. It wasn't something where it was bouncing between games. It had live look-ins when something happened, but the point of a red zone like service, the point of a red zone like show is to only have live look-ins. The whole concept that you're supposed to build the whole plane out of live look-ins. All right, you're not supposed to focus on a specific game, and I think that's a lesson that the NFL learned really early on, that its game is full of moments, and those moments need to be showcased, and showcased in a format that is constantly streaming like an IV into someone's veins. And I think you have soccer that can really take advantage of it, like MLS. Every single Saturday and Sunday has a bunch of games on in the same window, but no one really ever thinks to watch all of them at once. Baseball, like we've talked about with baseball and softball, both at the college level, and then baseball at the pro level could really take advantage of that. And baseball has it on the MLB network with Big Inning, which I found really interesting. A lot of things, a lot of sports and a lot of leagues can take something away from this and build upon it, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very fair.
Okay, on that fair note, we'll move on. We have a couple other notes to finish up today's episode. The first one, your final Georgia Tech athletic event of the 21-22 athletic year is Nicole Fegans in the NCAA championships for the women's 5,000 meters. That is a 7:25 start. 7:25 Eastern time start on Saturday, the 11th in Eugene at Hayward Field in Eugene. I'm never going to get that right. That will be on ESPN, so I strongly recommend that you tune in. We'll talk about that in detail after that result goes live, or I guess goes final. A couple of other notes from around the country in terms of tech sports. Anthony Wilkins was named men's basketball associate head coach. There were a couple of football commits. I don't know which one of you has this open, but I assume it's Jack. Do you want to walk us through a couple of those real quick?
It is not me, surprisingly.
I thought one of you had this open, so now I am going to vamp while I get it open.
Oh no!
I have it open. There was an official visit weekend for Georgia Tech this weekend for the class of 2023. Georgia Tech collected an offensive tackle and edge rushers commitments. That's Ethan McKinney, the first member of the 2023 class as your offensive tackle, and then Anthony Little is your second member, who is the edge rusher. Little is out of Upper Marlboro, Maryland, which is a DC suburb, and McKinney is from Lassiter High School in Marietta, Georgia. So that covers the football commitments. Let's talk a little bit about some tennis awards, some women's tennis awards that came down. Mr. Grant, I assume you actually have these open.
I will in just a second. No,
God, so prepared.
Four Georgia Tech women were named to the ITA All-America teams. That's Intercollegiate Tennis Association for those following at home. Two doubles teams. So that's Carol Lee and Kate Sharabura, top 10. And then Kylie, I always want to say Kaylee. I don't know why. Kylie Bilchev, Ava Roster, who reached the NCAA quarterfinals. So yeah, that's good to see. 15 doubles teams earned that, 7 from the ACC. And it is the first time Tech has had two doubles team in the same year earn that, with also the only school to put two doubles teams on that All-American list, which is really great to see. But also it's one of those times when you go, man, you win two doubles to get 1 point. That's something where, maybe that hurt us a little bit this year, and you don't even think about it until way after.
Don't galaxy brain yourself. Take the compliment and move on. Don't overthink it.
It's not a compliment to me. This is just Jake, ruminating. We're ruminating. That's what that's called.
Nice SAT vocab. Mr. Purdy, you have the last item on our list, which I have conveniently not spoiled.
Yes, our old dear coach, depending on your attitude on how that all played out for his reign, but Coach Paul Johnson's on the College Football Hall of Fame ballot this year, which is really good stuff. Is that the right ballot? I got that right.
It's the National. What is it? National Football Foundation.
Oh, it is College Football Hall of Fame. Yeah.
College Football Hall of Fame.
Yeah. I forgot if there was like another separate thing for coaches, but no, it's the same one. So he'll be on the ballot. I'm sure. He is one of the 9 coaches that's on the ballot this year. I'd be shocked if he didn't get in, just because his winning percentage is incredible. He was a 656, 189, 99 losses. So it didn't get to that point. He was 82-60 at Tech during his years. He's 4th in Tech history at the moment, and I think after Collins has his time, he probably will stay there by the end of it, though. So a nice little walk down the road, possibly for a fair number of the alumni association, not the alumni, sorry, the athletic association. Probably the alumni association too. By the end of it,
Jake and I would go to another banquet at the College Football Hall of Fame.
Hey, if they invite me, I'm all there. It's
a
matter of getting that.
I'll put on a suit and show up. We'll be media.
The last time we were there, we had to push the rec into the building, not through any fault of the rec. But as long as they don't make me do manual labor, that sounds good to me.
I will push the rec into the building again. That was fun.
That sounds like fun. But no, yeah,
I think it was kind of not fun.
It's a cool marker. It's just a cool little marker here. I don't know when so the class is gonna be announced in early 2023.
Yeah, it is the 2023 ballot, just to be clear.
So
they still have to vote on it.
Yeah, they still got to vote. So don't expect Paul's name on the list of College Football Hall of Fame people inside Bobby Dodd this season. But come the 2023 season, that certainly is a real possibility. So it'll be a cool little way to close out that era in a sense after Calvin got in, and then Calvin still needs to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame still.
No, he was in the Pro Football Hall of Fame now.
Oh, he's in the Pro. That's right. He was recent. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the recent ones. He needs to come back and get his degree. That's the important part.
Oh man. Well,
let's hope those credits don't expire.
Old men yelling at clouds.
He's doing all right. He's doing all right for himself. So
he runs a nice little THC business, from what I understand.
But yeah, good news all around for the Johnsons.
Absolutely, Mr. Grant. Any other news items before we head out for the night?
Just a random thing that came and popped up in my head. It's starting to be Atlanta summer stuff season, whether that's car shows at Atlantic Station, beer fest, wine fest, other food related things. I think Porch Fest was a couple weeks ago.
It was fun.
I was gonna say, if you're around the city, I think those types of things are things that maybe we don't talk about much because we're a sports podcast, but we're also civic minded gentlemen, and now's the time to go enjoy some of the stuff that Atlanta has to offer. Maybe go explore new neighborhoods, new food, new breweries, things like that, because now's the time to do it. Little hot, but should be
it's very hot.
It'd be good to get out and about, whether that's walking, biking, going for a cruise, a drive cruise, whatever that is.
Going for a cruise, yes, in your boat-sized sedan.
Gas is expensive right now, dude. I don't know about that.
Yeah, no. Take Marta. Take
a cruise on Marta. Yes, that sounds efficient. Mr. Grant, with that being said, please take us home.
From the rumbleseat@gmail.com for comments, questions, suggestions. We read anything that you send there. So we want to know what you guys want to hear at FTRS blog on Twitter. You can find me or Jack at Jake Grant 98 or at Jack Nicklaus, and that'll get you where you need to go. It's been a pleasure speaking with y'all, and you know where to find us. We want to make this podcast what you want to hear. So have a great rest of your week.